I'm Flavia Zimmermann from the Australian Institute of International Affairs in Western Australia, and today we have with us Professor Shafeeq Ghabra from the Kuwait University. And I would like to acknowledge and thank the University of Western Australia Centre for Muslim States and Societies, the Centre for Arab and Australian Relations, and the Australian National University for sponsoring professors' visit to Australia. Thank you for being with us, Professor.
Thanks for having me.
And in the light of the latest developments in the Syrian conflict, could you please just give us an overview of the main factors that have triggered the situation in Syria and whether there is any hope for peace in the future?
I mean, we woke up this morning on strikes by the Trump administration on a Syrian base because the Syrian military did use chemical weapons, a particular gas, against a Syrian village of innocent civilians and created a disaster there. And that has happened more than one time. It was understood during Obama's administration that the Syrian regime surrendered all their chemical weapons. It looks that they didn't surrender, and they've tricked Obama, and it looks now that they're up for a very difficult battle with the new administration. However, when we look at Syria, we need to understand the following. In Syria, there was a rebellion in 2011, part of this Arab revolutions of 2010 to 11. But Syria started in 2011, and in March 2011, it was affected by what happened in Egypt, among other places, in Libya, etc. The first wave of the Syrian rebellion was composed of young, I would say innocent, youthful men and women who came to the streets with no experience, but they had their hearts and minds in the right place. They just wanted a more accountable government, a government that provides them freedom, that provides them an ability to live with dignity, that provides them a future, that allows them to be employed, but also to be able to have the kind of human rights that does not persecute you and does not let you be, like in Syria, under the influence and under the intervention of about 16 different security apparatus in every city, where whatever you say, it's a very brutal dictatorship. Has been so for a long time. There were hopes that Bashar al-Assad will be the liberal one, the younger one, not an iron-type, Soviet-style regime, but did some changes, however, ended up marginalizing important sections of the society and did not change the security apparatus, which was extremely harmful to the daily lives of Syrians. So there was a rebellion. All those who organized the rebellion, all those activists who were involved in the rebellion were hunted down. 10 to 14% of this first and second wave of organizers who led the rebellion were all either taken from their homes or shot at during demonstrations or sniped by their snipers of the regime and arrested, many arrested, and they were all murdered in cold blood. 10 to 14,000 of those activists were murdered. So you ended up you skimmed the leadership of the rebellion, the peaceful rebellion, the non-violent rebellion, the rebellion that wanted peaceful transformation was totally cut down and gunned down. That created a vacuum. I believe that the Syrian regime has calculated this well, and they had in their jail hundreds of Qaeda people and ISIS-like who were allowed to operate from Syria against the Americans after 2003. Throughout 5 and 6 and 7, when Americans were very much involved in Iraq, through the borders. But when the situation changed and the Americans became less involved, and these Qaeda and the ISIS people were crossing the borders and still doing their attacks, the Syrians decided this is over. The Syrian regime decided this is over, so they put them in jail. When the Syrian rebellion began, and they hunted down all the activists, peace activists, they released all the ISIS and Qaeda people from their jail, believing that they will go and fill the vacuum on the other side. And therefore, nobody then in the world will say that the Syrian regime is fighting peaceful young activists, but is fighting terrorists. And it's this paradigm of either Assad or the terrorists is what the regime wanted in order to get the world to come again to support whatever the regime does in violations under the disguise of fighting terrorism. So this militarized the Syrian rebellion, and there were a lot in the Syrian rebellion who had good understanding, tried to avoid militarization. Some of those militarized stayed on the moderate thinking, like the Syrian Free Army, like others who were involved. But yet ISIS emerged, and the Assad regime was in a way gaining from that aspect, but it was the regime's strategy. So, to put it in a nutshell, America can destroy ISIS. The world can destroy ISIS, but ISIS is not the problem. ISIS is the symptom of the problem. The real problem is the kind of regimes that produce ISIS, such as the Assad regime, that in its tactics and its strategy wanted always to have an extreme in order to justify all violations of human rights, chemical attacks on populations, etc., etc. This game has to be pointed, and it has to end. And so to get Syria out of where it is, Assad will have to go. Now maybe there can be a compromise with important sections of the Syrian regime that their hands have not been carrying the blood of the Syrian people. They've murdered more than 400,000, 350,000 Syrians. They ended up creating a refugee problem that the world has not known in a long time. Millions have had to leave Syria. They bombed towns and cities that didn't have any way to defend itself. They destroyed Syria. So the regime has to take responsibility. Somebody has to take responsibility. And the Assad regime has to take responsibility. But I do believe there are those in the Syrian regime that have not gotten themselves involved. Maybe part of that with the opposition, with all the peace activists that continue. I mean, today you get a ceasefire in Syria, and immediately you see thousands of people in the streets marching, calling for peaceful transformation and change, calling for representative government, calling for a democratic transition, calling for an accountable rule, calling for all these human rights expressions that the Syrians wanted. So we need to find the formula that can bring this about, because it does exist at the grassroots of the Syrian population.
Fascinating, Professor. Thank you very much. And just reflecting a little bit more on the Syrian conflict, in your opinion, which will be the geopolitical implications of removing Assad from power, taking into account that both Russia, Iran, and Lebanon, to some extent through Hezbollah, supports the Assad regime?
So Hezbollah has been highly involved in support of Assad, Russia as well, but not necessarily that Iran and Hezbollah and Russia are going to go all the way defending the Assad regime. The Assad regime is a weak regime now. It is fully dependent on Iran and Russia. If Iran and Russia decide tomorrow that Assad will not be the president, they can make it happen. So this set of powers also, not necessarily Iran and Russia see eye to eye on Assad or eye to eye on the future of Syria. And we have the Trump administration also has its own evolving vision of Syria. And you also have the Syrian people and what they want, and the Syrian rebellion, which continues to have. And you also have the Turks, and you also have the GCC countries. So all together, it is a reflection of the regional structure, and yet the Syrian people continue to express themselves. Just recently, the opposition was able to take whole areas. Then it lost it. Then it gained others. So there is a fighting spirit among the Syrian people, and at the same time, the Assad regime is in its weakest point, and it will not be able to rebuild Syria. It will not be able to control the entire territory. Neither the Russians can control the entire territory. They will be stuck in a long war, complicated war, and there will be casualties. Neither Hezbollah, neither the Iranians can control the entire territory of Syria. So there has to be a better vision for the future without Assad, and a way that can fulfill the aspirations of the Syrian people, or else this conflict will continue with definitely regional implications.
Mm. Thank you very much, Professor. Now, just giving closure to our interview, if you could please give your opinion on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and to which extent there is any hope for of peace between Israeli and Palestinians, and to which extent Israel has been willing to make compromises to settle a peace deal.
So Israel, under Netanyahu, has not been willing to make any compromise. There was a time when such a compromise was potentially possible. There was Rabin, the Prime Minister of Israel, and there was Arafat on the side of the Palestinians. And at the height of negotiations and compromises, and even withdrawals, an assassin, a Zionist assassin, an Israeli assassin, not an Arab, not a Palestinian, not from ISIS, not from Qaeda, not from any Muslim, but a Jewish Israeli came and assassinated the Prime Minister of Israel, which set a whole range of events that later on brought about the extreme right, and brought about Netanyahu, and brought about a slow ending of the Oslo Accords, and brought furthermore more settlements, more colonization of Palestinian land, more grabbing of territories, more in the wall was built. Beyond that, there was the Intifada as well, so the wall was built after that, and so Gaza is around the wall, the West Bank is around the wall. In the West Bank there is apartheid, around Gaza there is apartheid, around all of Palestine, Israel, there is apartheid today. So it really ended up with a racist situation, an apartheid situation. It ended up roads for Palestinians, roads for Israelis, housing settlements behind walls, nice, colorful, well-built, etc., but behind the wall, on Palestinian territory, and Palestinian towns and villages encircled, crushed in economic terms, and Israeli army and security keep going into these towns, arresting those youth who resist and who are trying to either end the wall or trying to end the apartheid or resisting the occupation, with rocks and with flags and with poetry and with slogans and with gathering at large groups, etc. So there is a state of resistance going on in the West Bank and in Gaza and among Palestinians. At the end of the day, it's a struggle for equality, it's a struggle for national independence, it's a struggle for ending apartheid. What forms of government, what forms of structure will come out, it depends who participates in this struggle. Palestinians, Israelis maybe, who are against apartheid, maybe more of them will be against it. Boycott also is having an impact by Palestinians and by supporters of the Palestine cause in the world. It's like South Africa at the end of the day. And there has to be a resolution at some point, but it has to be just, equal, that allows people to be happy, allows people to live with dignity, that allows people to claim their territory, to claim their life, that allows people to find solutions to deep-rooted problems that Palestine, since 1948, we've had the Nakba, the catastrophe that ended up creating hundreds of thousands of refugees, then other wars, now there are Jews want a connection to the land. Whatever the historical 2,000 years ago connection is, Palestinians with a more recent connection want a connection to the land, whether to visit, to come, to settle for a while, whatever it is, to pray, to visit the mosque, to whatever they want to do. I have to find a solution to this. Palestinians are emotionally connected to this land. I understand Israelis and Jews are connected to this land. How can we solve this problem? It has to be addressed. And it cannot be one group coming after 2,000 years, waking up one day and saying, oh, 2,500 years, we had an existence in Palestine. Now we need to come and settle. And then what do we do with the natives who've also been settled? And it wasn't an empty country. It wasn't an empty land. Settled over hundreds and thousands of years as well, and then kicked out from their land. And they have a connection. And they are educated, capable, try to organize, have an amazing diaspora, have capital, have life, and they want that connection to continue. So the struggle goes on until fairness is found in one way or another.
Pleasure talking to you, Professor. Thank you for being with us, and for more information, please visit our website, www.internationalaffairs.org.au.